So today we're going to talk about supply and demand. A lot of times when economists talk about it, they have a graph that they show, and you may be shown this on your SOL. They look a little complicated, but it's actually very easy to understand the basics. So here we have the beginning of our supply and demand graph. As you can see on the x-axis, you've got quantity, meaning how many of a good is there. So for example, in 2007, the first iPhone was made. In 2006, the quantity would be here at 0. But as time has gone on, the quantity has increased, which would move further on the x-axis. Now on the y-axis, you have price. So as price goes up, it goes up on the y-axis. So using those, you might see price just as a P and quantity as a Q. So for supply and demand graph, you have two lines. The first one is supply. It usually looks like this. Now, as you can see, this is a positive line, so it is going this way. But in general, when supply and demand graphs are shown, they don't have the actual arrow. So what this means is, as time goes on, generally, supply increases. So like the iPhone, in 2006, when they didn't exist, there was 0 supply. But now, let's call this 2020, billions have been made. And so over time, the quantity has risen. So that is the supply line.
Mr. Worth, if you're in the building, could you please call?
Now, the second part of a supply and demand graph is demand. And this is how the demand line generally looks. It usually goes down as a negative line. Now, why is this? Well, demand changes as price and quantity change as well. So, for example, using the iPhone example again, in 2007, when they were brand new, they were very expensive. So they would obviously be very high on the price. And quantity, there wasn't that many being made. So quantity is pretty low on the x-axis. So it starts up here. But as time has gone on, more iPhones have been made, as you can see with the supply line going up. And there are more competitors, there are more options on the market, so demand has gone down for an iPhone. Now, that doesn't mean demand isn't high, it just means since 2007, it has generally gone down. People aren't going crazy over this new thing called a smartphone. Everyone has a smartphone. It's just, could it be Apple? Could it be Samsung? Now Google has one. And so it's less important to have that only one type of smartphone, the iPhone. So the demand has gone down. So on a normal supply and demand graph, this is what you're going to see, this type of X. There is one other part you really need to know, and it is here, where the two lines meet. This is called, this point, equilibrium price. Now, what this means is, this is where anyone who wants the phone generally has enough money for it due to the price. Okay, so if the price is here, and there are X amount of iPhones on the market, so let's say here, then that is the perfect line or perfect point where demand, how many people want the phone, meets supply. They're able to get the phone. So it's where supply and demand meet. Now, let's say it's not actually at the equilibrium price. So let's just say the supply of iPhones is right here. Well, that means that there are quite a lot of iPhones on the market. But because this is high up on the y-axis with price, that means there are so many iPhones in quantity, but they're very expensive. Let's pretend it's like $1 million. No one would buy an iPhone for $1 million when there's like 100 million on the market. That just doesn't make sense. So people would go to other places. Now, let's say that the actual supply is down here. There haven't been many iPhones made, and they're very cheap. Now, you may think, well, wouldn't that mean there's a huge demand for it? No. This generally happens when the product is unknown. So, for example, a brand new cell phone company makes a new type of phone. No one really knows about it. They only have a couple because they don't have enough money to make more. So no one really buys it because they don't know what it is. So using this type of graph, you can directly see where supply meets demand and where the equilibrium price is.